The first thing Marcus Vale heard that night was not applause, not the sound of a crowd cheering, not even the countdown before a massive livestream event. It was a sentence spoken quietly by a man who had already decided Marcus didn't belong. Whatever you're doing on that laptop, stop. People like you don't get to touch the system. And for a few seconds, the entire backstage area at the Riverfront Convention Hall in Denver went silent. Not because anyone agreed with him, but because everyone felt that uncomfortable moment when a room realizes someone just crossed a line. Marcus had heard words like that before. Different building, different faces, same assumption. The funny thing was, every time someone underestimated him, they were usually standing right in front of something he had built. The Global Vision Media Summit was supposed to be the biggest event of the year for the company hosting it. Thousands of attendees filled the convention hall, executives sat in the front rows, and millions of viewers were waiting online for the opening keynote. The cameras were ready, the stage lights were perfect, the speakers were tested, but behind the curtain was where the real battle was happening. Because in modern events, the magic people see on stage is only possible because of the invisible world running underneath it. Servers, network switches, security systems, data streams, endless cables connecting everything together. One small failure in that chain and the entire show could collapse in seconds. Marcus knew that better than almost anyone. He wasn't the kind of person who walked into a room expecting attention. Actually, he avoided it. He wore simple clothes, carried an old backpack, and had a habit of standing near the wall instead of in the center. Some people thought confidence looked like walking in and making sure everyone knew your name. Marcus had learned confidence could also look like quietly fixing a problem before anyone knew there was one. Years earlier, when he first started building his company, people rarely took him seriously. He didn't come from a famous technology family. He didn't have a powerful network of investors behind him. He was just a guy who spent years learning systems, breaking them down, rebuilding them, and understanding how every piece connected. Eventually, he created NovaStream Technologies, a platform that handled digital broadcasting infrastructure for major organizations. The company had grown faster than he expected, but Marcus stayed the same. He still answered technical emails himself. He still looked at problems before looking at titles. And most importantly, he still remembered what it felt like when people judged him before they knew him. That was why, when the signal problem started 20 minutes before the keynote, Marcus didn't panic. He was there because NovaStream was powering the entire broadcast system. But he didn't arrive with a team of assistants or announce himself like some celebrity founder. He simply walked backstage, showed his access badge, and started checking the network. The problem was strange. The system wasn't completely down, which would have been easier. It was something worse, a slow degradation, a tiny failure hidden somewhere inside hundreds of connected devices. The kind of issue that could make an experienced engineer waste hours searching in the wrong places. Marcus sat in a corner with his laptop open, watching the numbers move across the screen. His fingers moved calmly. No wasted motion, no frustration. He had seen this kind of failure before. After 9 minutes, he found the pattern. After 11 minutes, he knew exactly what needed to be adjusted. And that was when Trevor Hale noticed him. Trevor was the production manager for Brightline Events, the company hired to run the summit. He was good at his job, but that day had already been brutal. 2 equipment failures, angry executives, and a countdown clock getting closer every minute. Stress has a strange way of changing people. Sometimes it makes them sharper. Sometimes it makes them look for something they can control. Trevor looked across the room and saw Marcus sitting near the equipment racks. Blue visitor badge, plain hoodie, laptop open, not wearing the official production uniform. To Trevor, it looked wrong. And when people are under pressure, they often mistake unfamiliar for dangerous. He walked over quickly. "Excuse me, what exactly are you doing back here?" Marcus looked up calmly, checking the signal path. Trevor glanced at the laptop, then at Marcus. "This is a restricted production area. We have certified engineers handling this." Marcus nodded. "I understand. Give me about 30 seconds and I can show you where the issue is." But Trevor wasn't interested in 30 seconds. Not from someone he had already decided didn't belong. He looked around at the crew nearby, making sure everyone could hear him. "Whatever you're doing on that machine, stop. People like you don't get access to infrastructure like this." The words landed harder than Trevor probably realized. Marcus didn't react the way Trevor expected. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He just looked at him for a moment, the same way someone looks at a person making a mistake they haven't discovered yet. Then Marcus turned back to the screen and typed one final command. Because the truth was, the system didn't care who Trevor thought belonged in that room. The servers didn't care about appearances. The network didn't care about titles. It only cared whether someone knew how to keep it alive. But Trevor was about to make one decision that would reveal exactly who understood the system, and who only thought they did. Trevor reached toward the equipment rack and pointed at one of the cables Marcus had been monitoring. "You heard me. Step away." There was a certain kind of confidence that only comes from believing you have authority, and Trevor had that confidence in full. He wasn't just asking Marcus to move. He was making a statement in front of everyone around him. The message was clear. This was his room, his operation, and Marcus was just someone who had wandered too close. A few members of the crew exchanged uncomfortable looks. They knew something was wrong with the signal, and they had seen Marcus working faster than anyone else. But nobody wanted to challenge the production manager in the middle of a crisis. Marcus slowly closed his laptop halfway and stood up. For a second, everyone expected him to argue, maybe explain his position, maybe mention that NovaStream owned the technology running the entire broadcast. But Marcus had spent too many years learning that some people don't listen because they lack information. They don't listen because they have already chosen their opinion. "Trevor," Marcus said calmly, "before you disconnect anything, you should know that the problem is not the cable. Pulling that connection will interrupt the backup feed." Trevor smiled slightly, the kind of smile people give when they think they have caught someone pretending to know more than they do. "Right, and I suppose you're the only person here who understands how this works?" Marcus looked at the screens behind him. "No, but I am the person who built this part of it." Trevor laughed quietly, not a loud laugh, not dramatic, just enough to make everyone nearby feel the tension. "Okay, sure, you built it, and I'm supposed to take your word over a certified production team?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The countdown clock above the stage continued moving. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes. Every second felt heavier. Trevor made his choice. He signaled one of the technicians. "Disconnect that line." The technician hesitated. He looked at Marcus, then at Trevor. "Are you sure?" Trevor's expression hardened. "Did I stutter?" The technician reached forward and pulled the connection. And almost instantly, every monitor in the backstage area flickered. The confidence on Trevor's face disappeared before anyone said a word. The live stream preview went black. The production dashboard flashed warnings. On the main stage, the opening graphics froze for a moment before cutting out completely. Across the country, millions of viewers saw the broadcast disappear. Inside the control room, nobody moved. It was one of those rare moments where everyone knows exactly what happened, but nobody wants to be the first person to say it. Trevor stared at the screens. What just happened? Nobody answered, because the answer was standing 3 feet away from him. Marcus picked up his laptop again, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with the quiet focus of someone fixing a problem that never needed to happen. He opened the system interface, entered his credentials, and within seconds the warning messages started changing. The backup connection rerouted, the damaged stream stabilized. The black screen slowly came back to life. One monitor after another, one signal after another. The broadcast returned, but something else appeared on Trevor's screen while the system restored. A small notification window. At first, Trevor ignored it. Then he saw the username. Then he saw the access level. Then he stopped breathing for a second. Account owner, Marcus Vale. Permission level, full administrative control. Company, NovaStream Technologies. Trevor leaned closer. No. It was barely a whisper. He clicked the profile details, hoping somehow he was reading it wrong, but the information was right there. Marcus Vale, founder and CEO. The person he had just accused of being unauthorized was the person who had designed the entire infrastructure his team was using. The room changed instantly. The same people who had looked at Marcus with suspicion now looked at him differently, not because Marcus had changed. He was still wearing the same hoodie, still carrying the same backpack, still standing quietly near the equipment rack. The only thing that changed was that everyone finally knew what had been true the entire time. Trevor had mistaken humility for weakness. He had confused a lack of attention with a lack of importance, and now he had to stand in front of the people who had watched him make that mistake. A few minutes later, the executive director of the summit, Elaine Porter, walked backstage after hearing the broadcast had nearly failed. She didn't waste time asking for a long explanation. She looked at the monitors, saw the stable feed, then looked at Marcus. "You fixed this?" Marcus nodded. "I prevented it from getting worse." Elaine looked at the room. then back at him. How long were you working on the issue before everything happened? About 11 minutes. She shook her head. We had 3 teams looking at this for almost an hour. Nobody said anything. Trevor stood near the equipment rack, silent. The same man who had been so confident minutes earlier suddenly looked like he wished he could disappear into the wall. Elaine turned toward him. Trevor, did you know who this was? Trevor opened his mouth, but no answer came out, because any explanation would sound worse than silence. He could have admitted he judged Marcus by his clothes. He could have admitted he assumed someone quietly working in the corner couldn't possibly be the person in charge. But some mistakes are impossible to explain without making yourself look even smaller. Marcus didn't wait for an apology. He didn't ask for recognition. That wasn't who he was. He simply packed up his laptop and prepared to leave. Elaine stopped him. You're not staying for the keynote. Marcus smiled slightly. The system is running. That's what matters. And that was the thing about Marcus. He wasn't chasing the moment when everyone finally realized he was right. He had already moved past that years ago. He knew there would always be people who judged first and learned later. The only difference was, now everyone in that room had seen the lesson happen in real time. As Marcus walked toward the elevator, Trevor finally spoke. Marcus. Marcus stopped but didn't turn around immediately. Trevor looked like he wanted to say something meaningful, something that could undo what happened. But sometimes there is no perfect sentence after you have already shown someone exactly how you see them. Finally, he said the only thing he could. I was wrong. Marcus looked back. His expression wasn't angry. It wasn't proud. It was simply tired. Most people are wrong when they decide they know someone before they actually do. Then, he stepped into the elevator. The doors started closing, leaving Trevor standing in the hallway with the sound of the live stream continuing behind him. The event went on. The audience never knew how close everything came to failing. The keynote started on time. The cameras kept rolling. The world kept watching. But backstage, everyone remembered one thing. The person they tried to remove from the room was the only reason the room was still working. And for Trevor, that moment would become something he couldn't forget. Because sometimes the biggest mistake a person can make is assuming the quietest person in the room has the least power. The strange thing about moments like that is, the people watching usually remember the confrontation, the embarrassment, the big reveal, but the person at the center of it often remembers something much quieter. For Marcus, the moment didn't end when the elevator doors closed. It followed him home, not because he was angry, but because it reminded him of something he had spent years trying to forget, the feeling of walking into a room and having people decide your value before they ever learned your name. He had experienced it when he was younger, sitting across from investors who barely looked at his ideas because they didn't fit the image they expected from a technology founder. He had experienced it during meetings where people would direct questions to someone else simply because they assumed that person must be the expert. And he had experienced it in smaller moments that most people would never notice. The little pauses, the doubtful looks, the quiet judgment that says, "Are you really the person responsible for this?" Marcus used to fight those moments. He used to feel like every misunderstanding needed to be corrected immediately. He wanted to explain his background, list his accomplishments, tell people exactly what he had built. But over time, he learned something important. People who truly understand value don't need a performance. They recognize results. The people who need the biggest explanation are usually the ones who have already made up their minds. That was why he didn't argue with Trevor. Not because Trevor was right, but because Marcus knew the system would tell the truth faster than he ever could. And it did. In the days after the summit, the story moved quietly through the industry. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't some public fight where everyone picked sides online. It was something much more uncomfortable for the people involved because it forced them to look at their own behavior. Several crew members who had watched the incident later admitted they felt uncomfortable but didn't say anything. One technician said something that stayed with Marcus. The worst part wasn't that he didn't know who you were. The worst part was that we all saw what was happening and nobody wanted to challenge him. Marcus understood that. Because power doesn't always come from the person speaking the loudest. Sometimes power comes from everyone else staying silent. And that was the real lesson behind the moment. Trevor wasn't just wrong about Marcus. He was wrong about what professionalism looked like. He thought authority came from appearance, from titles, from standing in the right place and wearing the right badge. But Marcus represented something completely different. He was the person who didn't need to look important because he had spent years becoming useful. A few weeks later, Marcus returned to another event hosted by a different organization. This time, When he walked backstage, a young technician immediately recognized him. The technician smiled and said, "You're the guy from the summit, right?" Marcus laughed. "I guess that depends. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" The technician smiled. "The guy who fixed everything while everyone else was panicking." Marcus shook his head. "I just found a problem and solved it." That answer was very Marcus. He never saw himself as a hero. He saw himself as someone doing his job. But maybe that was exactly why people respected him. The people who are truly skilled usually don't spend their time convincing everyone they're skilled. They spend their time improving, learning, and quietly preparing for the moment when things go wrong. Trevor also changed after that night, although not everyone believed he deserved the benefit of the doubt. Some people argued that he only apologized because he was embarrassed. Others said a mistake under pressure doesn't define someone's entire character. And maybe both sides had a point. Because people are complicated, someone can make a terrible decision in one moment and still have the ability to learn from it. The real question isn't whether someone has ever judged another person unfairly. Almost everyone has at some point. The real question is whether they are willing to admit it when they realize they were wrong. Trevor had to face a difficult truth. The person he tried to silence was the person who saved his event. The person he assumed was unqualified was the person with the highest level of expertise in the room. And the person he thought needed permission to be there was the person who had given everyone else permission to use the system in the first place. Looking back, the most powerful part of the story wasn't the screen revealing Marcus's name. It wasn't the executives walking in and thanking him. It wasn't even the moment Trevor realized his mistake. The most powerful part was that Marcus never became the person Trevor expected him to become. He didn't use his position to humiliate him. He didn't demand everyone apologize. He didn't turn the moment into revenge. He simply let the truth stand on its own. Because sometimes the strongest response isn't proving someone wrong. Sometimes it's showing them that their opinion never had the power they thought it did. And maybe that's the question this story leaves us with. How many times have we looked at someone and decided we understood their entire story based on one small detail? Their clothes, their job, their accent, their position, their background. How many talented people have been overlooked because they didn't look like what someone expected success to look like? And on the other side, how many times have we been like Trevor, so focused on protecting our idea of authority that we accidentally push away the person who could actually help us? At the end of the day, the machines, the cameras, and the millions of viewers weren't what made that moment unforgettable. It was the simple reminder that respect should come before assumptions, because you never really know who is standing quietly beside you. The person you ignore today might be the person keeping everything together tomorrow. If you were in Trevor's position, would you have reacted differently under that kind of pressure? Do you think Marcus handled the situation perfectly by staying calm, or should he have defended himself sooner? Leave your thoughts in the comments below because everyone sees moments like this differently. And if you enjoy stories about unexpected victories, hidden talent, and the moments when people finally get recognized for what they truly bring to the table, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more, because sometimes the person everyone overlooks isn't the weakest person in the room. Sometimes they're the one person the entire room depends on.